Hey everyone, welcome back to the lab. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to validate side project ideas and build projects that you are proud of. So I love creating side projects. It's a fun and fulfilling way to explore, play with, and impact the world, and I have quite literally built a life around it. Over the years, I've built and shared dozens of side projects here and on my YouTube channel. But there's so many more ideas I haven't yet built, and likely never will. My project backlog currently has 3,379 ideas on it, and there's no way I'll be able to build all of those in my lifetime. Plus, it keeps growing as I add new ideas. And honestly, that's okay. The idea is not to do all of them, it's really to have a bunch of ideas, most of which will suck, and pick out a few that you think are worthwhile to pursue. In this post, I'm going to share my personal system for choosing which side projects to take on, as well as filtering out ones to avoid, pulling from my own observations over the years of what led to good and bad projects over time. All right, and first we're going to start off with some goals for validating these project ideas to give you some context on what the system is and isn't good for. And so I want to share a little bit about the goals of the system based on my own values for creating projects to provide context on why the system is the way it is. Hopefully this helps you decide if the system is right for you, or if you might want to look for a different one. Now, personally, I love to create, so my system is biased towards creation. Less thinking about creation, more actual creation. This means that the validations themselves are less comprehensive and work intensive, and really more there to filter out ideas that are likely or obviously bad than to provide a ranking system for how good something is. This lets me do as little work up front as possible to prevent time wasting ideas and move on to actually building them. And as you should be able to see already, this kind of differs from a lot of validation frameworks because often those try to do a lot more work up front to invalidate things because they don't want to waste time building. But here, me building stuff isn't wasting time, so really I want to focus on that. And so the system really has three goals that it tries to achieve. So the first is less analyzing, more creating. I like creating, so the more of that I can do, the happier I will be, within reason. The second is to validate projects are worthwhile with respect to their cost. That said, I don't want to just waste my time. I want to avoid toiling away at something for years only to look up and realize I didn't get anything out of it. So it needs to have a little bit of value attached to it. And then finally, I want to ensure I will enjoy creating the thing. So projects should be fun. This really is my favorite thing in the world to do. So if I build a system that robs me of that fun, then I am really just building myself a life of misery. You only live once, so you might as well enjoy it. And so what this means is that this validation is not built to find the most optimal, profitable business idea. It likely will uncover ideas that will lead to small, profitable businesses because it does focus on problems, needs, and desires, but it will rarely help to identify a VC desirable unicorn-ready idea. So if that's what you want, it's probably best to look for a different validation framework. And if you are looking for a framework for finding business ideas, I've written about this in the past, and stop wasting your time on bad startup ideas, so you can go look at that there. Now, what the system does do is validate idea seeds for the core building blocks of what I consider a successful side project, a project that aligns with my values, that I will enjoy working on, and that is worth the cost. Thus, a project that is worthwhile to explore, grow, and see where it goes. In my experience, this means these projects succeed even when they fail, and most projects will fail. So you can be proud of the work you put in and the results you got out of it, regardless of the external outcome. Now, personally, this gives me a lot more fulfillment in my projects and creation cycles because I'm not as affected by the outcomes I can't control. Instead, I can be confident in the decisions I made and that I could control, and then when a project inevitably doesn't work out, I can move on to the next one with a clear mind. All right, now on to how I validate project ideas. So my system for validation is to check if a project idea fulfills three buckets. The first is if the world wants and will use it, and I want and will use it. The second is I am good at it, and the third is I am interested in building it. Now, a project idea does not necessarily need to hit all three buckets for me to decide to prioritize it, but usually I bias towards those ideas that do. And if it doesn't hit all three buckets, then I like to think critically about why it doesn't, and whether I'd actually be happy and fulfilled pursuing it. Usually this results in me realizing that I probably wouldn't like pursuing this idea, like actually doing the work of the idea, even if it sounds promising on the surface. This is kind of one of those should moments where it's like, oh, this is a good idea, I should do it. But usually for me, if it doesn't hit all of these three, it's actually like, but I don't want to do it. And so it's probably an idea that is good, just not good for me right now. Note, this is very similar to my values for finding fulfilling work. And this is no accident. I like my systems to be aligned from high-level goals to low-level actions, and since projects are something I build every week and every month, I definitely want those to be aligned with my long-term goals. Now here I'll dive into a bit more detail about each of these buckets and why I find them useful. Also give you some more context on what exactly do they mean from my perspective, so you can actually kind of see how they're implemented. All right, so the first bucket is the world wants and will use it, and I want and will use it. And so I found that I lose interest in projects if I don't believe in its impact. Impact is basically the effect it will have once created, and if I don't believe in that effect, then it's unlikely that this project is worth the cost, and unlikely that it's going to hold my attention for very long. When I say impact, I'm not only talking about impact on people's lives and solving people's problems. This is usually like, the business version of this. You get paid to do these things. Though I do think that's a very strong factor in impact and is usually what you are talking about. In my side projects especially, I think impact can also be providing something that people enjoy. And this is something for a long time I think I overlooked, is that like people, yes, they do buy things to, solve their problems and stuff, but honestly, a lot of it is just following their own desires and their feelings and their needs. Like nobody necessarily has like a problem getting water, and therefore like that's the thing that makes them buy water. They just like have a need of water, and they just buy whatever version of water is on the shelf. There's no like problem any one of those are actually solving. It's just a need that's being fulfilled. And so it's simplified here from impact towards something people want or will use to capture this product or this broader idea. And this is what Y Combinator does. They're like build things people want. And I didn't like it for a long time, but I'm slowly coming around to like, actually that is probably the simplest way to say these things. And I found that there are like two perspectives that really matter to me from this impact. And the first is that the world wants it. And this helps me determine if this is a real problem and desire or need by looking at market data. So are a lot of people actually having this? Can I find people that are actually having this problem or need? And I think this is important if you want this to be a business project. I mean, obviously if it's not, then you don't necessarily need to do that. But also I found that it's useful to validate if this thing is as cool as I thought it was. A lot of times I'll have ideas and I'm like, oh, I've observed this problem somewhere. And I am really sold that this is something that is worthwhile to do or solve or something like that. And then when I actually go to look at like market data or find other people in the world that also think it's cool, I never can find examples of this. And this is a good way to check myself to just see if this is just an opinion I have. It's not actually based on anything. And the second perspective is do I want this thing? And it doesn't necessarily mean that I have the exact same problem or desire or need. I can just be invested in bringing it to life, and that's enough. But I do need to be invested in it for some reason. I want it, or people I know want it, or I could see why this is useful, stuff like that. I found if I'm not personally invested in this, even if there's a huge world need or want for this thing, then I really can't get motivated to work on it, and so it's probably not worth me pursuing. So I'm going to provide some examples for these to kind of contextualize them. And so an example that would pass this is CloudSeed my F# project boilerplate. And so I found I was struggling to set up projects when learning F#, so I knew that this would be useful to me. And so this fulfills my, personal need. And then I also discovered many others with similar issues in these communities on Reddit, on Twitter, who were interested in building with F#, but were having problems actually getting started and setting up their, first web app. And so together this fulfilled both the, world bucket and the me bucket. And now here's an example of something that didn't pass this. And so my example here is working at a betting website, a sports betting website or a casino or something like that. So in my latest software engineering interview cycle, I found a lot of betting websites that were hiring quite a lot, even in the downturn of jobs. And they were paying, pretty high, pretty at the top of band, which would make it, an attractive place to work at. I think betting itself is okay. I'm not trashing anyone that, does this, but I think it largely does lead to bad financial outcomes. And so while I don't judge those people who do it, I also don't support services that I see as taking advantage of these people, especially when you dig into what these things are making money off of. It really is kind of a predator prey kind of thing. And all the stuff that they do to optimize it for betting more and not understanding the odds and stuff is kind of it feels bad. you know? And so this is clearly something that like the world wants. These betting websites are doing incredible work, really very profitable, growing super huge in the US. But it's something that I personally can't get behind, and so it'd be like a bad fit for me. All right, and so the next category or bucket is like, am I good at it? And so I get bored a lot, I have finite resources, and so for my projects, I like to focus on things that align with my strengths. This is good because it allows me to usually get a reasonable result with limited input cost, which is, nice for me. So when I get bored of it, ideally I already have an output that's ready to go. And for me, this often means taking on web-based projects that I can build in 1 week or less, and that have elements that I can market via my shares. And this is useful to me both so I can like market this, whatever I built in 1 week, but also because it gives me littler milestones that I can do working towards this, so I get like less bored and actually things like are built and shared with the world. And I'm decently good at building these things, so I can build something reasonably quickly and move on to the next thing. And so like my shares, like these videos and stuff, I try to do in like a few hours max, so I can just get it out of the way before I get bored. And my web-based projects, I really try to have milestones that are like less than 1 week long, and this is like on the side, so really it's going to be less than a few hours that I put into it in that 1 week because it's not my full-time job. And that's like really important to me, especially for side projects. Now I do want to note that like this doesn't necessarily mean things I'm good at building today. It can also mean things I think I could be good at and I'm interested in getting better at, as projects are a great way to learn this stuff. And I do think side projects are like an excellent way to explore new technologies. I just think it's really important to be mindful of like your innovation budget. Like if you try to do a whole new thing with a whole new tech stack, like you're probably going to struggle for 6 months and never get it done. So instead, like build everything 95% with stuff you are already good at, and then the extra 5% use for learning something new. And that way you can learn the new thing and then also just like get your thing out in 1 week. And so an example of this that worked for me was with 1000 checkboxes, which is basically a stupid little website that lets everybody click the same checkboxes online. I'm inspired by the 1 million checkboxes from like several weeks ago. And my goal here was to just see if I could build this with HTMX, because I was curious about HTMX polling and syncing and stuff like that. And then to limit the build to a few hours, because this is a stupid little website, so it's like not worth more than that. If it's a great way to learn HTMX and I can do it in a few hours, then it's like, oh, it's fun, and I win either way. And I was already really like good at spinning up small web apps. This is the whole reason I built CloudSeed even, is so that I can spin up a web app in like a few hours and get on with my life. And so this played to my strengths here while building to a new strength I'm working on, which is HTMX. And that's an example of like, do the 95% thing of the boring stuff I already know, and then just like a tiny bit of like new stuff with my innovation budget. Related to this, you might be interested in why you should choose HTMX for your next web-based side project. And I am basically using it in all my web apps that require that level of dynamism. All right, and the final bucket is something I'm interested in building. So at the end of the day, I need to be enjoying my time on Earth. With projects, I try to make sure each project is worthwhile, and one way I do that is to make sure I'm interested in doing the work to actually build the thing. And this helps me stay away from projects that I might be good at, but like would find it to be a slog. And this is often a lot of those more like unicorny things where it's like, this is a great idea, you should do it, but it's kind of like, oh, but I don't want to, and therefore I actually should not do this thing. For me, this is often a lot of things with like a lot of sales or support or inventory management or like manual labor or any of those things. Like I just don't find that stuff fun, and that's something I've learned about myself, and I just like have to accept that. And instead go towards those things that I would enjoy. And really that's just building these simple scalable systems while learning along the way. And so an example that like passed this thing was my F-sharp options scanner. So I was curious to see if I could build a robo-trader for stock options. And in the end, it didn't work out, but I enjoyed the process because I was curious about the domain and got to build with technologies I enjoyed. And so the project failed, but it was still a success for me because I enjoyed that time. And for an example that failed, in my 6 months of trying to be a founder last year, I basically launched nothing. And this was really because I kept trying to pursue ideas that had good markets. The world wanted it, so it's something that like should have been done. It's something I should do. But I ignored whether or not I was actually interested in building the thing and doing the work to do it. And ultimately, this led me to not build anything and kind of being stressed along the whole way because I was like, I should be doing this. But then like everything in my being was like, I really don't want to do that. Like, don't make me do that. And so in the end, I didn't. And so, this is a huge waste of time and really kind of fell off the creation bandwagon because I just like wasn't inspired by anything that I was doing, which kind of just sucked. And so that's something I try to avoid, these days with this bucket. All right, and while we're here, I want to talk about my long-term project strategy with this, very simple validation framework. And so at the outset, I shared that this validation strategy is probably not sufficient for someone looking to start a large business. And this is because it doesn't focus on any kind of marketability. Really, it's just focused on core elements of value, balancing the outside world with the values of the creator. And so I think most validation frameworks that are like actually looking for a big business, they're going to look at like market caps and like look at all the other, people in this space and like, all this stuff. And so if you're looking for a unicorn thing, if you're looking to make like millions of dollars off your business, this is like probably not the strategy for picking those kinds of projects. But I want to call out that while this is not a great validation strategy for these big businesses, these big ideas, I do think it's a good strategy for building sustainable businesses. And so my long-term strategy for my projects is basically this: create a bunch of stuff, enjoy the process, and then double down on what works, evolving those into businesses. Now, this is basically the small bets portfolio project strategy for business. The idea is that most projects fail, but it's likely that some exponentially outperform in a sufficiently large population. And this is the power rule in action. Most things suck, like 80% of them, while a few things do better than all the rest combined, probably like 20%. Note that this is the basic strategy that a lot of VCs take. Invest in a ton of companies and double down on the unicorns that come out of it. This is stuff like, Y Combinator and Techstars and stuff like that. Like really what they're doing is they're investing in a ton of companies super early stage. Most of them drop out, don't ever get that company off the ground. But then a few of them that do end up having valuations that are like 1,000, 10,000, a million X, like, whatever these other ones are. And that really carries the entire portfolio. And it also aligns with what many of the most popular indie hackers do. People like Levels.io, Dan Bisaya, who runs Small Bets, and then the Bali Mark, who is, Indie Hacker of the Year in 2023. They build dozens of projects, and most make no money. Like they probably have dozens of projects, and usually like 1 to 3 actually make meaningful amounts of money. But usually, eventually, by just going through the steps of making like full-on projects, 1 or 2 start taking off and they can build from there. And the way that I kind of think of this is that each project is a plant and each idea is a seed. We don't know for sure if each seed will be able to turn into a good plant. Some are going to be better than others. Some might have problems. Whatever, we can't know that beforehand. All we can do is check the seed for any noticeable issues and give it what it needs to grow. Even though many plants will fail to grow usefully, or many plants will just grow regularly and not be the standout unicorns that you want, over time we should have a garden of healthy plants created by planting and tending each of these individual seeds and slowly curating them for the best crops. And I think this is an even better metaphor if you go into like that plant stuff of like, yes, Darwinism, whatever, you take like the best seeds of the best plants and that like grows them towards, the better version. But also the part where they're like cutting off parts of them and grafting them together to get like the best parts to be with the best parts. And a lot of like building side projects is that like in one side project you'll have built the authentication system, and another side project you'll have built like your checkout system, and slowly over time you can graft those parts onto the other ones to make an even better plant basically every time. Now, will this actually happen? Who knows? But I'm excited to find out and will enjoy myself along the way. Next. So my personal plans have me building about 3 projects each month, and I use this system to basically, help cull down the projects that I even consider, and then I'll just usually take a few there that I'm excited about. And most of these that I build don't ever see the light of day, and many are little features on existing projects that don't even get their full-on posts or any posts at all. But I do enjoy creating them, and a few do end up in my shares and businesses, especially the ones that I write here on the blog. Now, I still haven't found my personal unicorn plant yet, but my garden is slowly growing with 4 fruit-bearing projects, which is way better than I had just a year ago. And this at least gives me some confidence that with regular tending, my project garden can and will continue to grow. Now, if you like this post, you might also like my journey from software engineer to entrepreneur and back again. You might also be interested in how I run my projects backlog with Trello. This is a few years old, but is basically still how I do it today. Just the buckets have changed to the ones that are here in this post. And you might also be interested in how to find fulfilling work as a software engineer and achieve more impact with less stress, more kind of philosophizing on the career path of a software engineer and how to align it with your own values. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.